Picture a silence so profound it allows you to perceive the delicate flutter of your own heartbeat. Now, amplify that by the ancient stillness of a monastery perched atop the world, where the wind whispers secrets against weathered stone, and the air itself hums with centuries of unspoken devotion. It was within this almost preternatural peace, a sanctuary seemingly untouched by the clamor of earthly affairs, that a young monk named Kale embarked on an oath that would reverberate through a decade and irrevocably alter the destinies of countless souls. In his early 20s, imbued with the fervent intensity of one who seeks profound answers in the very fabric of existence, Kale made a decision of astonishing magnitude. He chose to silence himself. This was no mere day of mindful retreat, no fleeting period of contemplative solitude. He took a vow of absolute silence for 10 protracted years, a seemingly insurmountable expanse of time in which not a single word would pass his lips. The immediate question that would undoubtedly grip the minds of any who heard of this extraordinary commitment was, why? What profound impetus could drive a man to willingly renounce the most fundamental tool of human connection for such an extended duration? His fellow monks, themselves dedicated to lives of discipline and introspection, could scarcely comprehend such a radical undertaking. Their whispers rippled through the hallowed halls, a mixture of disbelief and awe coloring their hushed tones. His master, the venerable Master Jin, an elder whose eyes held the collected wisdom of countless spiritual journeys, gazed deeply into Kale's resolute countenance and discerned not mere eccentricity, but an unwavering determination, a quest for truth so profound it transcended the perceived necessity of spoken language. On a night bathed in the ethereal glow of a full moon, casting long dancing shadows across the monastery courtyard, Kale stood before the imposing statue of the Buddha, its serene visage a silent testament to the peace he sought. It was there, under the watchful gaze of centuries past, that he sealed his extraordinary destiny with a final audible exhalation. In that moment, he consciously relinquished the power of speech, believing with unshakable conviction that within the very void of unspoken words lay a potent and untainted truth, a crystalline clarity that the ceaseless cacophony of the external world so often served to obscure. His was a path towards ultimate liberation, a journey to awaken his consciousness to a realm beyond the ephemeral illusions crafted by the incessant dialogue of the mind. The constant narration of the ego. Thus commenced the truly remarkable odyssey of Kale, a solitary monk who, in his deliberate choice of silence, inadvertently ignited a quiet revolution, a subtle yet powerful force that would, in ways yet unforeseen, forever change the lives of thousands upon thousands of individuals who could scarcely imagine the profound impact a single, silent vow could ultimately wield. His silence was not an absence, but a presence, a pregnant stillness that held the potential for transformative understanding. The initial days of Kale's vow plunged him into a solitude unlike anything he had ever known. Even within the confines of his secluded monastery, the absence of his own voice, the inability to respond to a simple good morning from other monks, or to articulate an idea during scripture studies, formed a tangible barrier. Yet, Kale had prepared for this. He didn't perceive silence as a deprivation, but rather as a gateway. His daily routine became a rigorous discipline, each action executed with acute intentionality. He awoke before dawn, when the mountain air was still laced with ice and the stars glittered with breathtaking clarity in the dark sky. His first task was to light the incense in the main meditation hall, watching the fragrant smoke rise in mesmerizing spirals, a silent testament to his devotion to the unfolding day. The subsequent hours were dedicated to deep meditation. Kale would sit on his cushion, as still as a statue, while the sun rose and bathed the monastery in golden hues. He focused on his breath, the sensations of his body, the ebb and flow of thoughts, without clinging to any of them. The external silence allowed the internal turmoil to reveal itself with painful clarity, but it also offered the space for that turmoil to dissolve. He noticed that his mind, deprived of verbal expression, began to reorganize itself, to settle. Thoughts became less urgent, more transparent. After meditation, Kale dedicated himself to the monastery's manual labor. He swept the courtyards with rhythmic, deliberate movements, cultivated the fertile earth of the vegetable garden with his bare hands, and washed the bowls with a mindful attention to every bubble and splash. Each task, no matter how mundane, transformed into an act of moving meditation. The absence of speech compelled him to observe more, to feel more, to connect more deeply with his environment and the tasks he performed. The sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, the flowing of water became a symphony he had never truly heard before. Communication with the other monks was carried out through simple gestures and expressive glances. In the beginning, there was awkwardness, a mutual adjustment to Kale's new way of being. Yet, as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, a different form of understanding blossomed. The other monks, initially perplexed, began to notice a subtle shift in Kale. His presence, though silent, grew more profound. His eyes, unburdened by the need to formulate words, seemed to hold a greater depth, reflecting a peace that transcended the ordinary. They started to communicate with him, not just through gestures, but through an intuitive recognition, a shared quietude that words often failed to convey. Kale's silence wasn't a void. It was becoming a resonant space. As the months of silence accumulated, Kale's world, far from shrinking, began to expand in ways he had never imagined. The initial struggle with the absence of speech gradually gave way to a profound sense of liberation. It was as if a heavy veil had been lifted from his perception. Without the constant internal monologue of planning, reacting, and forming words, his mind experienced an unprecedented clarity. He discovered that most of his previous mental chatter had been a relentless commentary on external events or an endless rehearsal of future conversations. Now, with the external input drastically reduced, his awareness turned inward. He began to observe the subtle shifts in his own consciousness with a forensic precision. Emotions arose and dissipated. Thoughts drifted in and out like clouds, but he no longer felt compelled to label, judge, or suppress them. He simply witnessed. This act of detached observation was a powerful form of meditation in itself, deepening his understanding of his own inner workings. Kale's senses, deprived of the dominant input of sound and speech, became extraordinarily acute. He could differentiate the distinct chirps of various birds outside his window, the nuanced scent of damp earth after a rain shower, or the subtle variations in the monastery's stone walls. The texture of his coarse robes against his skin, the warmth of a teacup in his hands, every sensation became vivid, imbued with a new kind of presence. It was as if the world, previously filtered through the lens of language and conceptual thought, was now being experienced directly, raw, and unfiltered. This heightened sensory awareness led to a deeper connection with nature. During his walks through the monastery's tranquil gardens, Kale would spend hours simply observing a single leaf as it unfurled, or the intricate patterns on a spider's web glistening with dew. He felt himself becoming a part of the natural rhythm, connected to the cycle of life and death unfolding around him. The mountains, once just a backdrop, now seemed to breathe with him, their silent majesty echoing his own quietude. Within the monastery, Kale's presence began to subtly change the atmosphere. Other monks, initially curious or even skeptical, found themselves drawn to his serene demeanor. His eyes, though silent, conveyed a profound sense of peace and understanding. When they sought him out, they didn't come for conversation, but for the quiet company, for the unspoken wisdom that seemed to emanate from him. His silence wasn't a barrier. It had become a mirror, reflecting their own inner states and inviting them into a deeper introspection. Kale wasn't just a monk. He was becoming a living testament to the transformative power of profound inner work. As the years of Kale's vow stretched on, his presence in the monastery transformed from an unusual curiosity into a quiet, almost sacred, fixture. He was now in his 5th year of silence, a living testament to profound self-discipline. Yet, what was truly remarkable was not just his endurance, but the subtle, yet powerful, influence his silence began to exert on those around him. The other monks, initially accustomed to verbal instruction and communal discourse, found themselves adapting to Kale's unique form of communication. They learned to interpret his subtle gestures, the gentle inclination of his head, the knowing look in his eyes. In turn, they began to speak less around him, not out of discomfort, but out of a growing respect for his chosen path. The common room, once filled with chatter, now often hummed with a softer, more reflective energy when Kale was present. Conversations became more deliberate, more meaningful, as if his silence was prompting everyone to weigh their words more carefully. Visitors to the monastery, drawn by its reputation for peace and wisdom, would often notice Kale. His serene stillness in the meditation hall, his focused movements during daily chores, his very aura seemed to command an unspoken reverence. They would ask the other monks about him, learning of his decade-long vow. This story, passed from mouth to mouth, began to spread beyond the monastery walls, reaching nearby villages and towns. Kale became known as the Silent Monk, a living legend of unparalleled dedication. People started to seek him out, not for advice or blessings spoken aloud, but for his unspoken presence. Farmers troubled by drought, merchants burdened by debt, even young lovers seeking clarity, they would travel to the monastery, sit in Kale's vicinity during meditation, or observe him as he worked. They found that merely being near him, observing his profound tranquility, offered a unique form of solace. His silence became a mirror, reflecting their own inner turmoil, and simultaneously offering a quiet invitation to find their own stillness. Word of his unusual calming effect grew. Some claimed that simply seeing him brought a sense of peace. Others felt a clarity of thought after spending time in his silent company that they couldn't achieve through hours of contemplation elsewhere. Kale, oblivious to his burgeoning reputation, continued his routine, his focus entirely inward. He was not trying to influence anyone. His profound impact was an unforeseen consequence of his unwavering commitment to his inner journey. His silence, rather than isolating him, was paradoxically connecting him to people in a way words rarely could. As the 10th year of Kale's silent vow began to loom on the horizon, and palpable anticipation settled over the monastery and the surrounding communities. 9 years had passed since Kale uttered his last spoken words. 9 years of profound silence that had transformed him from a diligent monk into a figure of almost mythical calm. The legend of the Silent Monk had grown far beyond the quiet valley, whispered in distant marketplaces and discussed in hushed tones by travelers passing through. People now made pilgrimages from far-off lands, not to hear a sermon or receive a blessing, but simply to be in Kale's presence. They came with their burdens, their questions, their spiritual emptiness, hoping that proximity to such profound tranquility might offer some inexplicable solace. They observed him during his meditations, watched him tend the gardens, or simply sat in quiet contemplation near him, feeling an unusual sense of peace settle over them. His silence, instead of pushing people away, drew them in with an irresistible magnetism. It was as if his stillness was a vacuum, pulling them away from the chaos of their own lives and into a shared moment of profound quiet. Within the monastery, the monks themselves felt the shift. Kale was no longer just a brother. He was a living teaching. His unwavering commitment inspired their own practices, deepening their meditations and making them more mindful of their own words and actions. They wondered what he would say when his vow finally ended. Would he share profound wisdom? Would he explain the mysteries of his long silence? The question hung in the air, unspoken, yet constantly present. Kale, however, remained outwardly unchanged. His routine was as disciplined as ever. He seemed oblivious to the growing attention, his focus entirely on his inner journey. Yet, internally, he was preparing. The long years of silence had refined his perception, honed his understanding, and brought him to a state of clarity he never thought possible. He had peeled back layers of ego, illusion, and attachment, confronting the raw essence of his being. He knew that the moment of his speaking, after such an extended period, would carry an immense weight. Every word would matter, and he felt a responsibility to ensure that whatever emerged from his lips would be nothing less than pure truth. As the final weeks dwindled, a collective breath seemed to be held across the region. People began to gather near the monastery, camping in the surrounding hills, eager to witness the end of an era. They had heard whispers, tales, and prophecies about the Silent Monk. Now, the time was almost at hand for him to finally break his silence, and everyone wondered what could possibly be so important, so transformative, that it required a decade of silence to prepare for its utterance. Chapter 6. The day of reckoning. The air on that momentous morning was thick with an almost unbearable tension, a profound stillness that mirrored Kale's own decade-long silence. The 10th year had culminated in this very day. Before the first rays of dawn touched the ancient stone walls of the monastery, thousands had already gathered, sprawling across the slopes of the surrounding hills, a silent multitude stretching as far as the eye could see. They were a diverse assembly, farmers and merchants, scholars and seekers, families who had traveled for days, all drawn by an insatiable curiosity and an unspoken hope. They sat patiently, facing the monastery's grand entrance, their faces etched with anticipation, their eyes fixed on the doors where the silent monk was expected to appear. Inside the monastery, the atmosphere was equally charged. The other monks moved with hushed reverence, their usual morning rituals imbued with an added solemnity. They performed their duties in near silence, their hearts thrumming with a mix of awe and trepidation. What would Cale say after 10 years? Would his voice even remember how to form words? More importantly, what wisdom had been forged in the crucible of such profound silence? Cale, however, remained in his private meditation cell, his posture as serene as ever. He wasn't meditating on what he would say, but rather on the vast emptiness from which words emerge. The years had stripped away all superficiality, leaving him with an unblemished clarity. He had transcended the need for speech, yet he knew, with an absolute certainty, that this moment, this singular utterance, was his purpose. It was the culmination of his vow, the final act of his extraordinary devotion. As the sun crested the highest peak, casting a golden glow over the assembly, a hush fell over the crowd. A single, small figure emerged from the monastery gates. It was Cale. He moved with a measured, deliberate pace, his simple robes fluttering gently in the morning breeze. His face, though aged by a decade of deep contemplation, radiated a luminous peace that seemed to cut through the vast silence of the gathered masses. His eyes, clear and penetrating, swept across the faces of the thousands before him, meeting their gazes not with judgment, but with an immense, boundless compassion. He walked to the center of the courtyard, stood before the multitude, and raised a hand, not in greeting, but in a gesture that asked for complete, absolute stillness. The already silent crowd held its breath, every eye locked on him. The air thrummed with unspoken expectation. 10 years of silence. The moment of truth had finally arrived. The silence that enveloped the thousands gathered was so profound that it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Every eye was riveted on Cale. 10 years of unspoken thoughts, unuttered greetings, unheard wisdom, all culminated. In this singular moment, the air hummed, not with sound, but with an intense, collective anticipation. Cale stood before them, his simple robes motionless in the gentle morning breeze. His face, etched with the serenity of a decade spent in profound contemplation, held no trace of nervousness or vanity. His gaze swept across the sea of expectant faces, not lingering on any one person, but encompassing them all with an extraordinary sense of presence. It was a gaze that seemed to see directly into the depths of their souls, acknowledging their hopes, their fears, their very humanity. Then slowly, deliberately, Cale parted his lips. The crowd leaned forward as one, straining to catch the first sound after 10 years of silence. What words of profound enlightenment, what grand teaching, what intricate philosophy would finally emerge from the lips of the silent monk? The moment stretched, pregnant with possibility. And then, Cale spoke. His voice, unaccustomed to utterance, was surprisingly clear, though soft, carrying effortlessly through the immense stillness of the morning. It was not a voice filled with complex doctrines, nor was it a lengthy sermon. It was not a call to action, nor a detailed explanation of his journey. He uttered a single, solitary sentence, a sentence so simple, so direct, yet so utterly potent, that it pierced the hearts of every single person present, resonating with the truth they had perhaps always known, but had never truly embraced. His voice, after 10 years of silence, declared, "All that you seek, you already are." A ripple, not of sound, but of profound understanding, passed through the crowd. It was a truth so distilled, so undeniable, that it bypassed the intellect and spoke directly to the spirit. There was no need for explanation, no need for elaboration. The purity of the statement, delivered after such a monumental vow, carried an inescapable weight. The silence that enveloped the thousands gathered was so profound that it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Every eye was riveted on Cale. 10 years of unspoken thoughts, unuttered greetings, unheard wisdom, all culminated in this singular moment. The air hummed not with sound, but with an intense, collective anticipation. Cale stood before them, his simple robes motionless in the gentle morning breeze. His face, etched with the serenity of a decade spent in profound contemplation, held no trace of nervousness or vanity. His gaze swept across the sea of expectant faces, not lingering on any one person, but encompassing them all with an extraordinary sense of presence. It was a gaze that seemed to see directly into the depths of their souls, acknowledging their hopes, their fears, their very humanity. Then slowly, deliberately, Kale parted his lips. The crowd leaned forward as one, straining to catch the first sound after 10 years of silence. What words of profound enlightenment, what grand teaching, what intricate philosophy would finally emerge from the lips of the silent monk? The moment stretched, pregnant with possibility. And then, Kale spoke. His voice, unaccustomed to utterance, was surprisingly clear, though soft, carrying effortlessly through the immense stillness of the morning. It was not a voice filled with complex doctrines, nor was it a lengthy sermon. It was not a call to action, nor a detailed explanation of his journey. He uttered a single, solitary sentence, a sentence so simple, so direct, yet so utterly potent, that it pierced the hearts of every single person present, resonating with the truth they had perhaps always known, but had never truly embraced. His voice, after 10 years of silence, declared, "All that you seek, you already are." A ripple, not of sound, but of profound understanding, passed through the crowd. It was a truth so distilled, so undeniable, that it bypassed the intellect and spoke directly to the spirit. There was no need for explanation, no need for elaboration. The purity of the statement, delivered after such a monumental vow, carried an inescapable weight. The single sentence hung in the air, a bell tolling in the deepest chambers of every heart present. All that you seek, you already are. It wasn't a command, a question, or a complex philosophical treatise. It was an undeniable revelation, distilled from a decade of absolute silence, and its impact was instantaneous, profound, and utterly transformative. No one cheered, no one spoke. A collective gasp, an almost inaudible shiver, passed through the multitude. It was the sound of 1,000 individual understandings clicking into place simultaneously. For many, it was as if a lifetime of striving, of searching for external validation, happiness, or enlightenment, suddenly collapsed under the weight of this simple truth. The relentless pursuit of more or different was instantly exposed as an illusion. The very thing they believed they lacked, the fulfillment they endlessly chased, was not out there, but deeply, irrevocably, within them. Tears streamed down, faces not tears of sorrow, but of release, of recognition. Some fell to their knees, overcome by the sheer weight of the realization. Others stood motionless, their minds racing, re-evaluating every ambition, every desire, every belief system that had driven them until that moment. The monk had not offered a path to follow, but a mirror, showing them the destination was their own reflection. The immediate aftermath was astonishing. People began to turn away from the monastery, not in disappointment, but with an inner resolve that hadn't existed moments before. Farmers who had come seeking answers for their troubled crops suddenly saw their land not as a source of livelihood, but as an extension of their own being, deserving of reverence rather than merely exploitation. Merchants, burdened by the pursuit of wealth, suddenly felt the hollowness of their endless accumulation, realizing true richness lay not in possessions, but in intrinsic Scholars, who had dedicated their lives to dissecting ancient texts, found the ultimate truth delivered in a single, unadorned statement that bypassed all intellectual complexity. Kale did not wait for reactions or applause. After delivering his solitary message, he simply turned and walked back into the monastery, disappearing behind the gates as quietly as he had appeared. His mission was complete. He had pointed to the truth, and the truth, in its profound simplicity, had set souls free. The crowd, once a collective of seekers, was now a gathering of awakened individuals, each left to grapple with the seismic shift that had just occurred within their own consciousness. The silence that followed his words was not empty. It was pregnant with new beginnings. The impact of Kale's single sentence didn't dissipate with the morning mist. Instead, it spread like an unseen current, carried by every person who had witnessed that extraordinary moment. They didn't return home to preach a new religion or advocate for a specific dogma. They returned as changed individuals, and their transformation became the most powerful sermon. A merchant who had been consumed by the relentless pursuit of profit suddenly began to conduct his business with a newfound integrity and generosity. He no longer saw his customers as mere transactions, but as fellow beings, extending kindness and fairness that baffled his competitors. A farmer, once plagued by anxiety over his harvest, found peace in the simple act of tilling the soil, connecting with the earth not as a means to an end, but as a sacred partnership. His crops, some said, seemed to flourish with renewed vigor. In homes, families found old arguments dissolving. Spouses, once locked in cycles of blame, began to see the inherent worth in each other, realizing that true happiness wasn't dependent on the other changing, but on recognizing the completeness within themselves. Parents stopped projecting their unfulfilled desires onto their children, fostering environments of acceptance and unconditional love. The endless seeking of external validation, the constant striving for an ill-defined more, began to wither away, replaced by an authentic contentment. The transformation was quiet, often unnoticed by the grand institutions of the time, but it was profound. People weren't abandoning their lives, but rather abandoning the illusion that their lives were incomplete without something external. They were dropping the burden of the search. They found solace not in new philosophies or spiritual gurus, but in the simple recognition of their own inherent wholeness. As this quiet revolution unfolded, word of the change began to filter back to the monastery. Other monks, who had perhaps doubted the impact of Kael's vow, now saw its fruits in the tangible shifts in the world outside their walls. Kael himself, having returned to his silent routine, remained detached from the adoration and the stories. He knew that the truth he had pointed to was not his truth, but the truth, eternally present for anyone willing to stop seeking outside themselves and look within. His single sentence had not given people something new. It had simply reminded them of what they had always possessed. Chapter 10. A society transformed. The years that followed Kael's single utterance saw a quiet, yet profound, transformation ripple through the villages, towns, and even cities touched by his message. This wasn't a revolution born of protests or new doctrines, but a reevaluation of fundamental values that reshaped individual lives and, by extension, the fabric of society itself. The obsession with external markers of success began to wane. No longer was a person's worth solely measured by their wealth, their titles, or their possessions. Instead, a deeper appreciation for inner peace, genuine compassion, and self-awareness began to emerge as the true indicators of a life well lived. This shift wasn't enforced. It simply occurred as more and more people recognized the inherent completeness within themselves, diminishing the desperate need to prove their worth through outward displays. Communities became more cohesive. Arguments over resources or status seemed less significant when individuals understood their own intrinsic value. There was a notable increase in acts of selfless giving, in genuine cooperation, and in a shared sense of collective well-being. Disputes were resolved with greater ease, as people approached conflicts not from a place of scarcity or ego, but from a recognition of shared humanity. The need to win at all costs receded, replaced by a desire for harmony. The pursuit of knowledge also shifted. While learning remained important, the relentless accumulation of information for its own sake, or for intellectual superiority, lost some of its allure. Instead, there was a greater emphasis on experiential wisdom, on understanding that came from within, through introspection and direct experience, rather than solely from books or external teachings. Education became less about what one knew, and more about who one was. This transformation wasn't universal, nor was it without its challenges. Old habits and ingrained patterns of thought didn't vanish overnight, but the seed of Kael's truth had been planted, and it continued to germinate in countless hearts. The very air seemed lighter, less burdened by the constant hum of dissatisfaction and striving that had once permeated society. The people, having been reminded that all that you seek, you already are, began to build a world that reflected this profound, liberating truth. Years turned into decades, and the silent monk, Kael, grew old within the tranquil walls of the monastery. He never spoke another word after that pivotal morning. His life became a living embodiment of his message, a testament to the profound peace found not in external pursuits, but in the inherent completeness of being. His presence, even in his advanced age, continued to radiate a deep serenity that touched all who encountered him. Kael passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his monastic brothers. There was no fanfare, no grand ceremony, for his life had been a continuous, silent ceremony in itself. His passing was not met with sorrow, but with a profound sense of gratitude and completion. His physical form was gone, but the echo of his single sentence resonated more powerfully than any monument could. The monastery, once known primarily for its ancient traditions, now became revered as the place where the silent monk had found and shared his ultimate truth. Pilgrims continued to arrive, not to see Kale, but to sit in the same courtyard where he spoke, to walk the paths he walked, hoping to touch the stillness he had embodied. The story of Kale, the monk who spoke only one sentence in 10 years, became a timeless legend, passed down through generations. Children grew up hearing the tale, a constant reminder that happiness wasn't something to be acquired, but a state to be realized. The profound simplicity of all that you seek, you already are, became a foundational wisdom in many households, influencing the way people related to themselves, to others, and to the world. It wasn't about converting to a new faith, but about awakening to an ancient universal truth that resided within everyone. The true legacy of Kale was not a grand institution built in his name, nor was it a new set of complex rituals. It was the quiet, ongoing transformation in the hearts of thousands. It was the subtle shift in human consciousness towards a greater sense of intrinsic worth and interconnectedness. His decade of silence, culminating in a single, potent declaration, had liberated countless souls from the endless, often fruitless, search for what they already possessed. His life proved that sometimes the most profound wisdom doesn't need 1,000 words, but just one, delivered from the deepest well of truth. Kale's story is not merely a tale of a monk's extraordinary vow or a singular, impactful sentence. It is a timeless parable, echoing across centuries and cultures, reminding us of a truth that often gets lost in the noise of modern life. His journey wasn't about becoming someone special, but about realizing the profound specialness that already existed within him, and within everyone. In a world increasingly saturated with information, opinions, and constant demands for external validation, Kale's decade of silence offers a powerful counter-narrative. It prompts us to consider the value of stillness, the wisdom found not in endless seeking, but in quiet introspection. It challenges us to ask, what truths might we discover if we, too, were to quiet the external chatter and the internal monologue, even for just a few moments each day? His single sentence, "All that you seek, you already are," transcends any specific spiritual or philosophical tradition. It's a universal truth that speaks to the core of human experience. It suggests that our relentless pursuit of happiness, success, love, or fulfillment often stems from a misconception that these qualities are external entities to be acquired. Kale's life and his message beautifully illustrate that these are intrinsic aspects of our own being, waiting to be recognized and embraced. The video you are creating, telling Kale's story, serves as a modern-day echo of his wisdom. It invites your viewers to pause, to reflect, and perhaps to begin their own journey inward. It's a reminder that true transformation often comes not from adding more to our lives, but from stripping away what is unnecessary, revealing the complete and perfect essence that already resides within. The monk's silence became his loudest sermon, and his one sentence continues to resonate, inviting each of us to recognize the boundless potential and inherent peace that is our birthright. The story of Kale, the silent monk, is not over. It continues. Every time someone hears his message and looks within, his journey is, in essence, our own unending journey of discovery.